the Kundalini Vidya in North America, they have even special workshops. They work with people who have deflected awakenings, and when the awakening gone astray and it's not traveling to the right channel, right pathway, So this is no longer a secret, and it is at least some find their way, some find explanations of this process. And this also, so that you all know, it's not like Kundalini is awakened, enlightenment around the corner, guaranteed, all is done. It takes a little more here. And this is very important that we do speak about that. So on one hand, we do speak about this process that some prefer not to, but also not with rosy kind of like glasses on. We need to have a clear understanding of this process. The two pathways on left and right, along the left and right side, the Lakshmi and Saraswati, are literally known as deflected risings. And they are not easy, they are quite painful. Because essentially the rising is there, it is experienced as rising, it is experienced as ascent. Only to take one nowhere, because Kundalini cannot enter any high realm from there. So it has no choice but to deflect down. And it's very exhausting.
How do you know that's happened?
How do I know how it is known? Because there's symptoms. You see, there's symptomatology. If awakening has been, especially when people have been going through this for years. Not that, I woke up 5 years ago and where is my enlightenment? No, that's not the case. But some people go for 25 years of exhausting journey. Precisely because it goes up and down and exhausts the endocrine system. Tons of chronic conditionings being essentially generated. This all needs to be brought and examined, and brought to a greater light, because this is part of the working of this process. So one of the things is that what qualified teacher does is to redirect the flow. Redirects the flow of prana, Shakti, in where it's supposed to travel. You see? That's why, if I can be skeptical or critical about this teacher, non-duality teacher, this is peanuts compared to my stand and stand of others like myself, to those who begin to teach this work without being properly prepared. Because they have no clue what they're actually working with. It's like giving a kid a nuclear power, literally, a nuclear device in the hand. Because this energy is extremely powerful. But how it is being employed, how it's being utilized, there has to be so many factors aligned, then, and meet the criteria for this work to unfold in the right way. I hope this is also clear.
How often does it happen that it goes through one of those two deflating ones?
Among those who have been awakened alone by themselves, I would say that's the majority of cases. Majority of our awakenings today is a DIY style. Precisely because of container. Container is not ready. There hasn't been the most important aspect is that, what's the most important aspect here is the descent of grace to do this work. When I will introduce now, and we'll together invoke that force, of which stands as a Shakti for Kundalini, this will be understandable how it actually functions, how it happens. But if it happens out of trauma, shock, giving childbirth, forcing yogic techniques, taking drugs. What are the implications where is the guarantee that this would render this process in the way it should? It's almost like I'm speaking now, kind of turning our theme into a seminar, kind of. But I do feel it's important to introduce it here. Important. So even if we give it a voice, this is my experience, at least. My experience in working with awakened people. Because all these awakened people come to me from those teachers. All of them come to me from those teachers. They go to these teachers deny the existence of that energy. And yet something happens. The teacher can deny it, but your willingness to experience it will bring it forth. But that teacher is not a conduit. So awakening has this, like no one's son, no one's child. Once there's a pattern, what needs to be done is to kind of, if you will, retrain, and take the awakened goddess back to the base and begin it again so that it can be done properly. And I have friends who had gone through that,
How is that experienced?
What?
Like when you have to bring it back down and restart.
Well, it experienced as suddenly sanity returned home. Suddenly you come back somewhere where you feel sane, because believe me, when the pathway is wrong pathway, and mostly is when it is like this spontaneous kind of awakening, and or often when it is facilitated by drug taking, or some other kind of where it's forced. You see? Let's put it forced. There is even a term, don't poke a snake, There are many different kind of like terms you can find in Indian language, in Indian way of speaking about this. So if it's not ready and it is awoken, then the repercussions are often not desirable, precisely because there's a likelihood that it will go not where it meant to go. You see? The difference between Shaktipat and spontaneous awakening is that Shaktipat, it's that, if you will, quantum science. It's literally the Shakti in the one in whom that process took place, and in the one who is undergoing or about to undergo that process is not different Shakti. You understand? So as it were, there's this instantaneous recognition takes place. And more importantly, there is a descent of grace, which allows to introduce the right trajectory then for the ascent to take place. I spoke about it in some of my videos before. But how it is experienced for the one who has been, for instance, for 25 or 30 years having this, exhausting experiences. It's like literally being finally given the chance to have some sanity. And many people resort to so many things because of the deflected, because of the complicated awakenings, because, not because, but rather, people resort to drugs, painkillers of all sorts, and all sorts of what subdues essentially this process. Especially the worst thing would be to go to the physicians, doctors, psychiatrists, because then the real treatment will begin, the real treatment. And that is even worse than anything, because then it will force that which is the sacred of the sacred, deep underground, only to wait there, to burst. You see? And we deal with this as well. We deal with those who have been under psychiatric treatment and so forth. So this is just, I don't even know why we ended up there, but we talked about the not bedtime stories, isn't it? But speaking more seriously is that this is not the invitation for you to contract with fear. On the contrary, it is mentioned for you to release that fear and understand that this process, what this process requires, what this process is about. So that what is actually like a kind of still pretty much of a white map on the map of that process, white areas on the map of that process, is being filled with inappropriate information, which will allow you to put this all together against your own experiences or along your own experiences. And that's why we speak about that. That's why we touch this subject. That's why we introduce this.
But for me, how you speak about it, like I told you in the last retreat, it is around fear.
Yes.
You speak about it, it's like, and when it's wrong, and all this pain, and so.
Every awakening, even when it goes fully legitimate, in the right way, is accompanied by purgation. So that's the only difficulty here, is that when system is being purged with something, you see? When system is being purged, it is accompanied by some diseases surface out of the blue almost, only to be cleared, pain and so forth. But the overall progression, the overall development, the overall unfoldment is a healthy one, is a part of the process. But when the awakening is following the trajectory, which essentially is undesirable, then we intuitively know that, because there is this element of up and down. Why? You maybe even be able to have an insight why. Because awakening also is when we become more in consciousness, obviously, isn't it? Awakening itself is not just a kind of a clinical process of some kind of clinical transformation. Above all else, what is happening? Above all else, we become more in our own consciousness. That's what expansion and ascent is. And when it is in an appropriate way, every indication, it is accompanied by inner peace. It is accompanied by deep inner stillness. It is accompanied by bliss. It is accompanied by all this, what makes us essentially more secure in life than insecure, even if we are faced with some physical challenges. I don't know one awakening without physical challenges, because our bodies are such. Our bodies are such. We are not yogis. Even those of us who are more prepared still will have to face a portion of that purgatory. There's no doubt about that. But the indications will be very simple. You can test it very easily by the overall unfoldment of that process. One of them is that undeniable presence of a bubbling bliss beneath everything. Because when it moves in the right pathway, it is accompanied by blissful experiences. Whatever the intensity is.